All right. Well, we got about 10 minutes. Might as well look at a few news articles while we wait for people to show up. So, something that's been hitting the news a lot because of the California wildfires is the fact that California's firefighters contain a lot of convicts. In fact, they had to let a lot of people out of prison because of the coronavirus, and it meant they didn't have enough firefighters. Apparently, they've been doing this for years, and a large number of firefighters are convicts, and it is highly sought after by convicts, even though you get paid some ridiculous amount like $2 a day, because the environment at the among the firefighters is much more pleasant than the environment inside prison. But the current they treat this as a rehabilitation program where the convicts are learning a job, but when they get out, they cannot be firefighters because they're felons and they cannot possibly get the certifications required. So they're trying to change the laws. It does seem to make no sense. If they're good enough to be firefighters when they're in prison, it seems like they should be good enough to be firefighters when they get out. And they're trying to change the regulations to make that possible, but it hasn't happened yet. New Zealand, there's a New Zealand startup, and this sounds impossible to me, but what they claim is that they are going to distribute power with no wires, with directional microwaves. And this technology has been around for a long time, but I think it's dangerous and inefficient and so on. And they're claiming it's cheaper and more efficient than using wires. So we'll see if this actually goes anywhere. It doesn't sound like they've got any new breakthrough in the technology, though. So, I mean, this has been around for decades and it's never been considered practical, but they're going to try it. Here's another thing. This apparently is really going to be practical. Not only Amazon, but several other companies are getting approval to use drones. So they will fly packages and drop them on your backyard or something like that, and have like 30-minute delivery for stuff. So that does sound pretty awesome if they get it working. I know in America, the commercial use of drones has been held back greatly by regulations because they don't currently have any lanes or speed limits or driver's licenses or cop drones or drone rules of the road and all that jazz. And it seems like you would need all that. You have all these drones flying around and I don't know what you do for a traffic light for drones, or you have some kind of air traffic control or something. But anyway, apparently they've approved it, so they're going to start testing it somewhere. So this is something that the rest of the world accepts as truth, and here's somebody that has actually tested it. And what they found is that if you get infected by COVID-19, the consequences of this depend greatly on how big of a dose you get. Yeah, now Jimmy says one of the criteria is size. Yeah, that's right. I know, because I know there's some drones. If you have a hobbyist drone, you can use it only to a certain height and it can only be a certain size. But professional drones, I think they're still trying to work out what the rules will be for like official commercial drones. Anyway, so now they've tested it and they've determined this is really true. If you wear a mask, it absorbs perhaps 80% of the particles in the air that you're breathing in, of the droplets, and that means you get a smaller dose of the virus, and a smaller dose of the virus means you have less symptoms and you're less likely to die. So it sounds great. I say even a cloth mask, it doesn't have to be a fancy mask, it makes it much less likely that you will get sick or that you will get seriously sick. So that sounds good. And so I think places like California that are enforcing mask wearing everywhere are correct. And of course, this is no news to the Chinese students. I know other people in China and Singapore and such, they figured this out long ago and had everyone wearing masks. In America, there's a small but extremely vocal minority screaming and yelling and claiming masks are no good, but they're clearly wrong. Anyway, one of the things that amazes me about America, as all parts of our government and society seem to be completely corrupted by the Republicans, and we seem to have abandoned almost everything, is that somehow our free press endures. Trump rails and screams about the free press and tries to get them shut down and tries to sue people for slander, but so far he hasn't got anywhere on that. And we have a very vigorous, very healthy free press, so you can totally find out information. But the rest of the world never has had it, and they haven't had it in Egypt. And now you can get 15 years in jail for a tweet. In fact, somebody who had left Egypt and was criticizing the government from afar was somehow extradited back to Egypt to be sent into prison for 15 years. So this is far more common. I don't think anybody in the world has the kind of free speech we have in America. almost all the rest of them have more rules. Even Britain has a law against blasphemy. Only in America can you really say almost anything. Anyway, so I think it's the most functional part of our democracy right now. So this is pretty amazing. If you want to run software on a Mac, it has to be signed by Apple, at least, unless I think you can turn off the signature verification, but Apple doesn't by default let you run anything without them, without it being notarized by Apple. But apparently a malicious fake Flash installer managed to get signed by Apple. So the process is apparently automatic. You submit it to Apple, it goes through their automated test, and the bad guys were able to sneak something bad through the automated test. So this researcher found a malicious product that would be approved by Apple, and when he told them, they turned it off, but then he found another one. So apparently there are various signed pieces of malware floating around. And let's see this one here, the case for making low-tech dumb cities instead of smart ones. Oh, well, that's interesting. Non-smart cities. Well, I don't know what's smart about our current cities. Oh, you mean, I know there's cameras everywhere. All right. I know a lot of people want to put sensors in their houses and stuff, but the mess with IoT, well, it's true. I mean, one option is not to have it. I mean, I don't have hardly any of that stuff. I got no smart speaker or anything. I got the internet, but anyway, it's an interesting issue. Let me add it to the news list links. I appreciate the tip. I know a lot of people have all kinds of stuff. And that may be something that people are interested in. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, IoT does expose you to being hacked. I mean, once you have all these smart gadgets, then they can get hacked. I know the latest one is the Elon Musk wants you to put chips in your brain. And I've been waiting for that one for a while. And he got it. He hasn't put it in humans yet, but he put it in a pig. But apparently he wants to have basically the Google chip. Anyway, this one I thought was amazing. It's my old alma mater, the University of Illinois. They have developed a new, better COVID test. It works on spit. You don't have to stick something up your nose, and they can give you an answer in like a half hour, and they test everybody twice a week. And so they're able to actually vigorously keep the virus down. So it's probably safer to be a student going to school on campus in Illinois than it would be to be almost anywhere else. So this is pretty awesome. If they can scale it up to where more of the nation can do it, it would be very good. They're talking about anyway, so almost every other college that opened up with face-to-face instruction is just having to close again because, of course, they haven't controlled the virus, and they can't possibly control the virus with the procedures that are provided by the U.S. government. But University of Illinois has made their own test that is much better. So if they can scale that out to everybody else, I think it would be a lot better. And so this is something I heard about from Scott Galloway, a famous luminary in education that might matter to you. Google will give you some kind of degrees now, Google's career certificate. So this might be something to get. See, I got a question here. University of Arizona is able to predict. Yes, I saw that one. Yeah, that's another way to do it. If you can monitor the wastewater coming from the toilets, you can tell if somebody's sick in the building, and then you can give more tests. That's another way to go. That would be only effective, I think, if you have everybody kind of localized, like in college dormitories. But yeah, I mean, a couple of the universities are actually doing a good job. Most of them have absolutely no idea how to do it, and it's ridiculous. But anyway, some of there are just like 2 or 3 degrees I saw here. But anyway, apparently Google is going to have a thing where you take about a $300 course, and then you take a cert test, like an industry cert exam. So it's not really a college. You don't really get a degree. But they claim that several major companies have said they would accept these. This is all they care about. They don't really care about degrees. So it may be an interesting alternative. Anyway, so let's get down to the official stuff for the class. So that's here. All right, so this is 152. And we're up to the 3rd chapter. So what I'm going to do is just talk about the contents of the 3rd chapter, and then I'll start you on the Splunk, boss of the SOC. More about that later. So once you have work experience, that is what matters most. And a lot of people don't really care about the college degree stuff. All they care about is industry certification, which I think is fine. All right. So I'm going to make this big, but not quite full screen so I can point around in it. So when you have a security incident, there's these are things you do to prepare, for instance. So when your incident happens, your question is going to be, how did they get in? Is it ongoing? How do we contain it? What information did they take? And what do we have to do about it? Who do we have to notify and disclose to? What do we have to do to fix the problem? And how can we secure things so they don't come back again? That's what you want. So here's the areas of preparation: preparing the organization, the team, and the infrastructure. So to prepare the organization, you have to have risk management running. So you have to identify the risks and have to have the right kind of policies. And there's issues about your users and your outsourced IT. So the first thing, you have to identify your assets. Your reputation is an asset. Just the fact that you've been hacked and hit the news is going to be a black mark for your reputation. The leaking of the personal information from your customers or the company is, of course, another asset you need to protect. And so those things are exposed by lack of patches, employees making mistakes, employees deliberately selling the data or sabotaging systems, and so on. So then you got threat actors. These are the people that might attack you. Most problems are caused by your own employees making mistakes, but there are also people who get inside the building and attack you, and of course the large group of people on the internet who might try to attack you over the internet. So if you have a use policy for your own employees, that helps prevent them from doing stupid things. If you have security policies, remote access, and internet usage policies, these things will help so that people are using two-factor authentication on their remote laptop and things like that to limit the risk. If you have outsourced some of your IT to be run by someone else, then of course you've got a problem because you don't even have access to the logs, the hardware, the images, and everything. So it's a problem. And if you ask them to help you because something has gone wrong, they might not respond quickly or provide you with what you need. For example, I know a lot of people use hosting services like GoDaddy, and then sometimes they come to me and say they've been hacked, and on the GoDaddy server, you don't even have access to your server logs, which I think you might have if you get a more expensive account. But you know, this is often the case. If you use a third-party service, you only have limited access to it, and you may not be able to get what you really would like to have to see what happens when something goes wrong. So a service level agreement is where you would negotiate that and say, we're going to have these instant response abilities in the service. If you plan for it beforehand and pay for whatever it costs to get that, then you'd be better off. All right. And so if you have multinational organizations, then you've got some complex issues. There are different privacy laws in each country. There are rules that certain data cannot leave your country. You have people in different time zones and so on. This was many, many famous cases of this. One of them was, I think, the United States government demanded that Microsoft hand over a bunch of private data to their users. And it turned out that the data was in fact in Ireland. And therefore, it was outside US law, so US privacy law didn't apply or something like that. There was a big argument, and that's the kind of issue that hits when your data is in all different countries. You hit a bunch of complex barriers. So your users, of course, are the most common way you get hacked. This is what pen testers and attackers typically do. They usually get in through phishing. They send email to everybody. They get somebody to click on an email. They take over one machine, and now they've got one user's laptop, which is not very powerful, but it is inside the network, and then they move out from there. So you have to make sure your users know what to do. So they have to know if they do have a security problem, what should they do? They should have a process they can go through. They should know who to talk to, and they should get a reasonable response from that person so they don't run off doing amateur investigations. And they should also understand they can't install unauthorized server software on company equipment that would tend to open up weird ports and make you vulnerable. This is another very common way people get in, because people put in third-party games, chat clients, and software that's not approved, and that stuff is out of date or poorly written and is vulnerable. So let's take a look at some cahoots, which would be here, and that would be 3A. That's good. All right. All right, let's see, we have 20 people, so let me set up a place to put the answers, the winners rather, which is here. Okay. $8:31. All right. Guess we could have a maximum of 19. I'll wait a few more seconds. All right, I'll give it a few more seconds, see if we got anybody else. All right, I guess that's it. All right, so a system administrator feels abused. What's happened here? That's an exposure, a very common one. Your unhappy employees are likely to make mistakes or indeed to betray you. All right, what item increases the responsiveness with outsourced IT? Service level agreement is what you use to require a certain level of performance from outsourced IT. All right, what problem is reduced by educating users? All right, they would know, hopefully, then not to install unauthorized servers. All right, and what situation may make it difficult to examine log files? Okay, that's outsourced IT. Good. All right. All right. All right. I've got the winners. All right, so let's go on to the next section. All right, so you have a team of people to handle these incidents. So you have to define your mission. They're going to have to respond to the incidents. You have to have a formal process, just like the police. So you always make sure the same things get done. Quickly decide whether you have an incident. First, you decide how big it is and contain it. Then you collect evidence and you have privacy considerations, and you have to consider how you're going to communicate with law enforcement and legal authorities as needed. Maintain everything confidential, because the incident, of course, includes information about your security that is probably not going to be public, and you may have to testify in court. So that would be expert testimony from your IR team, someone who's qualified to go to court and testify about the evidence you found. And you certainly, of course, even if you don't go to court, which most incidents don't, you're going to need to explain to management what happened and make recommendations about what they should do. So you have to have communications procedures. If it is a typical requirement that you put a confidentiality note on all communications about an incident. The point of this is if you get sued, then the other side will have a discovery request. They will say, you must tell us everything about when you got hacked. And you do not need to disclose things that have this message on them. And that makes a big difference because then they are private discussion with your lawyer, and they are not subject to disclosure. So the arguments you have behind the scenes about trying to guess what happened and trying to figure out what to do about it, you probably don't really want all that to go to the other side in a lawsuit. So you put message notes like that on it. All right. So attackers have often compromised your communication channels. So they're monitoring the emails. So if you start sending emails back and forth to organize your instant response, you're often alerting the bad guys that you're onto them and helping them stay a step ahead of you. So you might use an off-band channel, some other kind of encrypted chat client or something, or encrypt the email and label things correctly. Make sure that you don't have things like what I'm doing right now, an open Zoom session where anybody can join. The bad guys might join your Zoom session and so on. Use case numbers and project names like code names so that if something leaks out, it's not obvious what it is, and so on. And adjust your automated emails and automated alerts from your intrusion system, not to be sending stuff off where the bad guys will see it. So you can get free email certificates here, and there are other ways to get encrypted email these days. When you have to send something out to external parties, like regulating agencies, then you have to use approved channels. You don't just have people on the team who are technical doing this. You pass it through a public relations department to control what goes out. Isn't that how one of the larger tech antitrust, since one email? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. That was Google being sued by Oracle for using Java. And when they first designed Android, one of the team did send an email saying, wait a minute, Java is proprietary to Oracle, and the use we're using of it exceeds the free usage. And that email, someone stripped away that extra message from that email for one copy, and the internal team at Google that did the discovery request failed to detect that. Because if you have 5 copies of an email and some of them have that message and some don't, you're allowed to withhold them all. But they failed to detect that. So they took a version of that email that had the extra bit removed, the confidentiality, and they forwarded it to Sun, which was then Oracle. And for a while, it looked like Google was going to lose several $billion because of that, because they were going to be forced to pay back royalties for everything they'd done in Android. The last I heard, they more or less got away with that in court, but it dragged on for years, and it was absolutely caused by an inappropriate disclosure event. Anyway, all right, so you've got official channels like your public relations and your legal office that send information from outside of your company, and there's an awful lot of documents that have to go out. You have status reports inside your company, you got live response reports of what you detect on the system and forensic examinations, malware analysis, and your intrusion investigation report, and all these things have deadlines and limits of who they go to. So you got a team. It'd be nice if you can have a well-trained team. What everybody really wants is experience, but an alternative is that they've been through a high-quality training program like one of these major colleges or SANS. That might be good. I don't think there's a certification for IR that's accepted yet, like there are for some areas of IT, but at least there are some famous programs that are widely respected. And then they got to have hardware. So you have to have, you have to protect the hardware that's used for this by encrypting it. And your external media should all be encrypted. They recommend TrueCrypt in your book. These days, TrueCrypt's replaced by VeraCrypt. There's also Microsoft has BitLocker to go. But encrypting everything is a good move so that it's less likely to fall into the wrong hands. And if you're going to do forensics in the field where you go to some other location and bring in equipment and start collecting evidence from machines, then you need a powerful machine, as powerful as you can get it, with a lot of buses and a lot of storage devices so you can image computers' hard drives. In your office, a forensics lab is usually quite powerful, and one of the main things you have to have is all the adapters and write blockers so you can gather evidence from all the different kinds of equipment you use. And the procedure of forensic analysis is you make a copy of the evidence device, and then you put the original in the safe, and you work only from the copy. The original is left untouched, so you can take it to court. Here is the computer they used to do this thing. That's the plan here. Although I say most incident response never goes to court, and they don't really care about that level of legal records, but sometimes they do. Being able to remote nuke and activation lock the devices. Well, yes, that's another option. Yeah, for portable devices, you might want to be able to wipe them remotely. All right, and so then you'll have block kits, duplicating kits, devices to acquire information from mobile devices like cell phones and such, which can be quite a job. Copying disk drives with a gizmo that won't erase. Yeah, that's right. There are special hardware disk duplicators. And that's the way if you do it in any quantity, that's the way you do it. All right, and so you need a lot of storage, you need a lot of cameras and blank storage devices, power strips, cables, all the tools to take apart laptops and get to the hard drives and so on. It can be quite a chore. And if you're going to monitor your network traffic, which almost everybody is, then you usually have to have a special system in your network cabinet just for this purpose. Because this computer has to capture all the network traffic at line speed. And so then it'll be running some kind of capturing software. I mentioned before, Wireshark is not appropriate for this. Wireshark can't handle a large amount of traffic without crashing, and it's not secure enough. You use TCP dump or one of these distributions designed for network monitoring, like Security Onion or Elk, which Elk is in Security Onion, and so on. So then you have software to analyze the data you collect. And there are these, NCASE is the most common, most famous one used by almost all police departments. You do not have to use a famous product that's commercial. They often say our product is accepted in court, but that's not what the famous and commercial popularity of a product is not what makes it acceptable in court. What makes technical evidence acceptable in court is the Daubert standard. And you just have to justify what you've done. If you have a scientific or technological product, you have to explain that this product has been tested, its error rate, there's general acceptance in the scientific community, and then as an expert, you just have to justify what you've done. So you have various tests to make sure that the technology you're using is respected by scientists, and the expert has to explain what they've done. I know people who go to court and they don't use any commercial product. They write their own product in Linux and they defend it in court. And they're able to impress the jury that they know what they're doing enough that nobody cares that they're not using a standard commercial product. The real evidence is the human expert testifying. You have to convince them that you are credible. That's what really matters. And the technology you use is really based on how much they trust the person defending the technology. So there's other software used by our teams. There are a lot of boot disks and USB sticks that you use to gather evidence in the field that boot a special version of Linux that can't alter the hard drive. And those are disk imaging tools and memory capturing tools. And so you do live response and look for indicators of compromise. And then the main examination suites are NCASE and FTK. Those are the two Windows-based commercial products that cost thousands of dollars and are very much the standard. And Linux users often use SleuthKit and Autopsy, which are much more difficult to use, but of course they're free, and so they're good for Linux experts. So evidence handling. Once you have gathered some evidence, if you ever plan to go to court, you have to be careful how to handle it. So you must have an unbroken chain of custody. You have to have a document that records who gathered the evidence, where did they put it, somebody was responsible for making sure it was not modified until it and locked it somewhere safe, like a safe, and then it was removed. And you just have to have, every time it moves from one place to another, somebody has to sign and then be willing to go to court and testify, I did take the hard drive out, put it in my briefcase, lock it and carry it to court and bring it here and made sure that nobody messed with it. You have to have an unbroken chain of custody or your evidence will likely be ruled inadmissible in court. All right, and there is a government document here from the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property section of the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice that specifies a long list of recommended best practices. And when I took a good forensics course in this stuff years ago, my teacher said there's about 10 common sense obvious things. Like when you do an analysis, you use a computer that is not connected to the internet, so it can't possibly have malware on it. You clean every drive before you put evidence on it, so there's no extra files on it. And simple handling rules like that. You keep MD5 hashes or SHA-1 hashes of everything you make so you can verify that all your copies are accurate. They're just simple things you do. And he said, if you actually do these 10 simple things, you will discover in court all the time that the other side didn't really do this. And you will therefore be more convincing than they are. Anyway, so then you should have some kind of internal knowledge base inside your company of all the evidence you gathered in previous cases and the conclusions of previous cases, and it should be searchable. The Microsoft knowledge base articles are essentially the external version of this. It's amazing how good it is. If you have a problem with a Windows system, you can search in the Microsoft knowledge base and you will usually find a beautiful document explaining exactly what caused that problem and exactly what to do about it. They really keep very thorough records of all the things that go wrong and what they do to fix them. And that would be something to aspire to as an IR team. All right, we got more Cahoots. 3B. All right, I think 16 is what we had last time. Might be a couple more. I'll give it a few seconds. All right, I guess that's it. Okay, which one is network monitoring? All right, Security Onion, good. All right, which one protects data on a stolen laptop? Full disk encryption, like BitLocker. All right. Which one prevents email from being discoverable? That's the label called privilege. SMIME encrypts email, but it does not prevent it from legal discovery, where they send you a court order and say you have to hand it over. Then you're forced to decrypt it and hand it over. But the privileged label means it's privileged attorney-client communication, and it is not subject to discovery. All right, and which one collects information about running processes? RAM is the best way to find it. You might possibly find information in the log about process starting, but the RAM is where you'll definitely find information about all running processes. All right, 3 for Zoe. Drew. And Mateo, all right? All right. So let's go back to here. All right. So then there's the infrastructure preparation. So you've got your computing devices. You, of course, want to manage the assets, know what they are, and your network configuration. They're really a matter of keeping track of what you got, and then segmentation, about which we'll say quite a bit more, especially when we go on to the Splunk demo. So You've got certain attack devices that you regard as important, like your servers that are up all the time, but attackers will typically attack the weakest spot, which is often some unimportant device that you don't pay attention to that hasn't been getting its updates and so on. So it is important to actually inventory everything you have and see that everything really has its patches and antivirus and intrusion protection system and everything else. You shouldn't have a bunch of old neglected stuff that's still on and connected to the network that nobody's properly maintaining. And so there are various host hardening guides. These are security technical implementation guides. Microsoft has recommendations. The US military has recommendations for each kind of server. And this is a good place to start. So then you've got asset management. You need to know where everything is, who's in charge of it, what it does, how it fits in your network. And then you have to have a survey of all your operating systems, all your switches, firewalls, your intrusion detection system, your antivirus, all your management software, all your endpoint applications and business applications. It's really a drag. And this is why most organized corporations have a very small list of approved software, and you have to use just the approved software and not anything else. So typically you have a blanket statement like you got to use the Microsoft version of everything, but you somehow have a small list of software. Otherwise, it is essentially impossible to keep it all up to date and patched and under control. There are tons of passwords used throughout your enterprise, everywhere. And not only are there all the passwords that your users and administrators have, there are service accounts making automated connections between your systems to harvest logs, forward email, and for many other purposes. And those service accounts also have passwords, and those passwords are often hard-coded in software and not ever changed, and nobody really knows them. So they're often a weak spot. So it is a big issue. And if you have older networks that were put together with cloning technology like Ghost, then they all have the same identical administrator password on every system. More modern technology like Swarm can avoid that, but it depends on how carefully you image them. And that's a problem, of course. That means any machine that gets compromised, the attacker can steal the local password hash, crack it, and now they have the password for the local account on every machine. In the background, you have services. These services often launch and run as system. That means they launch before anybody logs in, and they're running with log on as a service accounts. And those accounts have passwords, like I say, that are often not visible and not rotated and not controlled. Then you've got software metering. Microsoft introduced this a lot, and now other people have it like Adobe. You actually have to have a server, making sure that you aren't running more copies of things like Photoshop and Windows products than you have paid for. And that, of course, means also that you have a place with records of when that product is running. And then you have performance monitoring to make sure your machines aren't overloaded, antivirus, and all these centralized logs for your event logs, which we'll talk a lot more about with Splunk. So centralized logging system is essentially necessary everywhere. The most popular products are the expensive commercial ones like Splunk, but you can do it with free software if you're willing to put more effort into setting it up, like Elk. And so some people will sell you specialized hardware just to process and handle the logs. Other people, like Splunk, is just software, and you run it on your own servers. But in any case, you have to have a server powerful enough to handle all the logs from all your devices, and that can be quite a job. Really a lot of logs coming in per day, even at a moderate sized network. And you have to retain that log data for a while. If you want to be taking credit cards, you're required to retain it for a year. So you can't just keep a small amount of logs and remain in compliance. So you have to log. If you're on Windows, which is what most people are using, then you have to have log on events, user and group management. If people are creating user accounts or promoting them, process creation, and you have to gather a lot of logs, and you have to forward them all to some central system, or you'll have no reasonable way to retain them, archive them, and search through them. On Unix, you do essentially the same thing, keep a lot of local logs, and turn on some accounting and forward it all to the same central logging system. And your applications all have their own logs, your database, email, DNS, and you have to forward the logs from all them and configure them all to keep good logs. So Your intrusion detection system and antivirus, of course, have to send logs, and you have to configure them not to delete malware. If they find something malicious, you don't want it to delete it. You want it to quarantine it so you can get a copy of it to analyze it, because you might want to look in there to find indicators of compromise on other machines. And you also don't want it sending automatically back to the vendor, which is the default of most antivirus, because that might alert the bad guys that your antivirus was detected, and it might even contain sensitive data when it sends data up to the server. So you don't want it doing any automatic reporting. This is how the NSA lost control of their hacking tools. A contractor took the NSA's proprietary military hacking tools and put them on a laptop with Kaspersky antivirus. Kaspersky triggered it as malware and sent it back to Russia, and then the Russians stole it from Kaspersky. So it was a disaster that cost human lives and created a gigantic global scandal and crisis, because they didn't do this. They didn't prevent their systems from automatically sending samples up to third parties who would then do things you don't want done. So you got your investigative tools like Access Data and Encase Enterprise. These can scan your environment. Access Data Enterprise version that costs about $90,000 can automatically push a agent onto a end device, and it can image the hard drive and the memory on the running device during a business day, so people won't know. So you can do an investigation where you suspect that one of your employees is doing something bad, and you want to investigate their machine without alerting them. And you can do all that with these enterprise class tools. Of course, you can write your own scripts and do it too, but these fancy tools make it easier. So you got to have patching control. Two-factor authentication is extremely useful. Google, about 3 years ago, switched to two-factor authentication everywhere. Everybody has these USB keys, and they have to have USB key plus their password. And they said since they have done that, not a single phishing attempt has succeeded, which is pretty impressive. So anyway, don't let people have administrator access if they don't need it. Everybody should have firewalls and AVs, antivirus. Did Snowden's disclosing NSA tools equally harmful as Kaspersky? Well, you could argue. Snowden's disclosure caused a huge uproar in the government. It didn't cause a cyber attack. I don't think Snowden didn't dump the information about tools so they could be used to attack people. All he dumped was the metadata, the promotional material and description of it, so that the people, civil rights people, could get mad at the intrusion. So he was basically a political activist. He was not dumping technical data. So I never heard of any technical data from his dump being used to further a cyber attack. There were some accusations that his dumps leaked some information because the people he handed it to, like Julian Assange, did not protect it and just dumped the whole thing out without sanitizing it. So in fact, there were apparently some foreign agents that were actually compromised by that, and their lives were supposedly put in danger. Other people say that wasn't true. But no, it wasn't. It didn't lead to a direct cyber attack. It just led to a giant political scandal. And of course, some people say that was good, and we needed to know that, and Snowden should be a hero, and Trump's talking about pardoning him and letting him come back. So what Snowden did, you can argue that it was even more good than bad, and some people do. And the cause for GIDRA, well, that was the issue. We were talking about that in another class. GIDRA was released, surprisingly, by the NSA, a very powerful tool. I don't know of anyone that's explained why they did that. My personal guess was this was an attempt to improve the image of the NSA after their image was very badly hurt by the Russians with the Shadow Brokers attack. But I'm just guessing there. I don't have any information from inside sources. Anyway, so like I mentioned, your end-of-life systems should be decommissioned. You shouldn't have old things that can't be patched anymore. You need configuration management to make sure everything is brought up to a minimum level of secure configurations, like removing default passwords and such. And here's another one here, was the Kaspersky telemetry leak. Yeah, we saw that one, okay. And then application whitelisting would be very powerful, where you only let known good processes launch. This would be much stronger than trying to enumerate all the bad stuff. It's just very hard to keep up with all the versions of white. So this is a heavy administrative burden, but it makes you much more secure. This is what iPhones do. iPhones will not install anything that does not come from the official Apple store signed by Apple. So that is very secure. It's very hard to get malware on an iPhone. Anyway, And you have military guidance from the DISA and from the NSA is available to give you some recommendations. So the next thing, which gets us into Splunk, which is why I wanted to talk about Splunk after this, is network segmentation and access control. And make this as big as I can. So I guess I got to leave it a little smaller so I can point around. So you have the internet, it comes in your border router, then you have firewalls and proxy servers and switches and VLANs, and you separate your network into segments. There's public services in the demilitarized zone. There's a finance, engineering, sales, IT, and internal services, and they're all separated and limited. So it's not easy to get from one zone to another. You have to pass through a device that checks to make sure that only authorized traffic is getting through. This is the kind of traffic control that makes you much more secure. The old way was to just have a flat network, one firewall at the edge, and once you're in, everything is just a near neighbor, and that is very unsafe, because then if any one of those devices gets compromised, the bad guy can race through the whole network without having to overcome any additional obstacles. So you have controls, traffic filtering controls, proxies, and you should have two-factor authentication for anything that jumps through a security boundary, like going from the public services in the web server into a more high security area like finance. You should have a two-factor authentication required to make that jump. All right. And so Microsoft remote procedure calls are a big problem. Microsoft, if you want to do file sharing, then you also have made it possible to launch processes on those machines. The two things come together. So you should be blocking all these things at your firewall. Only internal resources should be able to reach these ports, not the internet. And so if you zoom into the finance department, they've got a multi-layer switch here, which may include a firewall. And then they have various services running on the local network here. And these are not visible from the outside. The only thing visible from the outside is RDP to get to the administrator's work session. And that is hopefully limited with something like a VPN with two-factor authentication so that only trusted people are allowed to do that. All right, so you control the traffic between zones, and you don't let a server send outbound traffic to the internet. So you've got servers here, application servers in your accounting that have got financial data and databases here. And these servers, you can't open a web browser and reach the internet on those servers. That's not what they're for. They only provide service to authorized users here. They do not make any outgoing calls to the internet in a properly organized network. I know it's related to RPC. Explain the hidden IPC share. Yeah, the IPC share will come back all the time, and it's used. So you can attack it. Also C dollars, D dollars, and E dollars. Yeah, all I remember is that it's related to RPC. I don't remember the details. But you do use it when you use Metasploit and other tools to attack with the RDP attacks or the SMB attacks. It's a big part of it, but I can't remember the details anymore. It's a good question, but I don't have any more. It's much more than what you already know about it. All right, so we talked about this. All right, so you don't allow traffic between ports on managed switches so that people can't get from one zone to another, so infections can't spread. And you might have black holes. If you have a address range, you're not using all the addresses in the address range. So traffic that goes to addresses you're not using, you could just, if you don't configure your devices, it will just try to get there and then send back something like an ICMP network unreachable message. But you should probably collect that traffic because that tells you who the attackers are. Anybody that's going to addresses you're not using is an attacker. They didn't go to a domain name you specified going to a real server, so there's somebody running a scan trying to find devices. So that would be a useful thing to record to see who's attacking you and perhaps block further attack traffic from that IP address or so on. Another thing some people like to do is put up honeypots, special fake devices just so they can be attacked. Most experts think these things are a waste of time. You'd be far better off to just secure your devices. And of course, you have a lot of documentation required. Everything should be recorded, all your network diagrams, the configurations of all your devices, and so on. So you should be logging everything. Firewalls have logs, IDSs have logs. You have a network tap capturing your network traffic if you want to capture all the packets, which is a good thing to do, although it's a lot of data. and so on. All these things are monitoring and producing logs, and they're all getting forwarded to a central log management system. And so your DNS and DHCP should also be logged and sent to your SIEM, because if you get an IP address in traffic, you don't know where it is unless you've also logged DHCP, so you can see which address had that, which device had that address at the time of the attack. And like I say, your DNS black hole should pick up domain requests to non-existent internal things and record it rather than just throwing it away, because that's another kind of scan. Someone's trying to find all your domain names. So we've got another Kahoot, which is 3C here. They're right on time. Right. I think we got one or two more last time, I'm not sure. Well, I guess that's it. Okay. All right. So which one has a password that's hard to change? Service accounts, okay. All right, which one destroys evidence? Antivirus, all right. Which log is essential to identify systems from IP addresses? That's your DHCP logs. All right, not the DNS logs. DNS connects alphabetic names to IP addresses, but DHCP connects IP addresses to MAC addresses. All right. And which one is a dangerous Microsoft feature? Remote procedure calls are where one device launches a process on another and the source of many, many vulnerabilities. I guess we got another? Okay. So which one reduces the risk from stolen passwords? All right, two-factor authentication. Good. Then people can still steal the passwords, but they can't log in with the stolen passwords because they don't have the second factor. All right. So Zoe again, good. And Wilson again, all right. And Mateo, all right, good. I've got the scores. All right. And I see a question saying, what about Office macros? Well, Office macros don't run on that kind of port. They run on a local machine. They're a common attack form. You trick somebody into opening an email attachment with an Office, and then it runs a macro, Excel sheet or Word document. That's typically the beginning phishing, but that's not really a network problem. It's a local problem on one machine. All right, so I'm going to stop this recording, and we ought to take a 15-minute break. We'll pick up at 10 after 7.